Murmurs of offensive attacks on Russian soil are gaining traction. More and more members of the NATO military alliance are now calling for Ukraine to be given the green signal to go on the offensive. The Moscow has warned that this move would actually widen the conflict. Our next report gets more details.
When the Russia-Ukraine war began, the West promised rock-solid support. It has provided Kyiv a steady flow of weapons in the battlefield. Primarily weapons that were of defensive nature. Initially, the focus was on Ukraine defending itself. Since then, Ukraine has been pressing its supporters, chiefly the United States, to allow it to use the longer-range weaponry they supply to hit targets on Russian soil. Ukraine already has long-range missiles and UAVs that can hit deep inside Russia. Moscow says Ukraine is already firing American ATACMS on its territory. Kyiv also has the British Storm Shadow missiles and American UAVs that have a range of 100 kilometers. NATO foreign ministers are in Prague in the face of growing calls for leading allies to lift restrictions on Kyiv from using Western weapons to strike inside Russia. The raging debate over whether to let Kyiv use arms sent by Western backers to strike inside Russia is overshadowing the talks. Having given maximum weapons, the US is towing a cautious line.
As what Russia does has changed in terms of how it's pursuing its aggression, escalation, we've adapted and adjusted to, and I'm confident we'll continue to do that.
Countries including Britain, France and the Netherlands say Kyiv has the right to use their weapons to strike military targets in Russia. Now, more voices are adding to the clamour.
Sweden has not stated any restriction about how Ukraine may use Swedish equipment, other than that they must be used in accordance with international humanitarian law. And according to the international law, Ukrainian forces striking military targets on Russian territory is legitimate.
Russia has no red line. And so that is why we need to make sure that when it comes Ukraine's defense in Canada, no condition on end user shipment of arms to Ukraine, and that is why we will continue to work with Ukrainian armed forces.
Apart from the US, Germany too has so far refused to permit Kyiv to strike over the border out of fear it could drag them closer to direct conflict with Moscow. Across the Atlantic, the White House says it still opposes Ukraine using US arms to strike inside Russia, though Secretary of State Antony Blinken hints that strategy could soon change. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We earlier spoke with retired Colonel David DeRoche, who joined us from Washington, D.C., and this is what he had to say about the prospects of the Western nations letting Ukraine strike deep inside Russia. Listen in.
The Ukrainian position is that, look, Russia is massing forces on our border and is firing into Ukraine from Russia, and we're prevented from responding to that. So they're using strategic depth as a means of conducting tactical operations. If the restrictions were lifted, and I think they probably should be, you could mitigate this by, for example, saying, okay, we can only attack within the range of these Russian glide bombs, say 200 miles within Ukraine. I'm just throwing out random numbers, but you could say, look, this is the danger area, and push, establish a degree of danger for Russian forces operating in Ukraine. But these long-range radars, which are being used to guide glide bombing launched aircraft, which Ukraine has no means of countering at the moment, this is a threat here.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.